The world remembers World War II through towering tanks, roaring fighter planes, and the blinding flash of the atomic bomb. But the real victory of the war, the technologies that quietly decided life and death, victory and defeat, never made the headlines. While the world watched bombs fall, America was winning the war in silence. B-roll, slow-motion black-and-white factory footage, sparks flying, scientists working in dimly lit rooms. Hidden behind locked doors, in underground labs, and inside secret military workshops, a different kind of battle was being fought. No gunfire. No explosions. Just formulas, blueprints, wires, and machines so advanced that their impact would not be fully understood for decades. These were not the weapons of fame, but they were the weapons of dominance. Tonight, we uncover the underappreciated American technology of World War II, the innovations that didn't make movie posters, but quietly reshaped global warfare forever. Many of these inventions saved more lives than any rifle ever could. Some erased entire enemy tactics overnight. Others became the foundation of the modern world you live in today: radar, computers, medicine, communication, and even the smartphone in your pocket. And yet, most people have never heard their names. B-roll, fast montage of radar screens, nurses working in field hospitals, early computers, encrypted messages flashing across screens. In 1940, the United States entered a war it was not fully prepared to fight. Its army was small, its equipment outdated, its industrial machine barely awake. But what America lacked in immediate firepower, it made up for with something far more powerful: engineering speed. From the moment the first bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, America didn't just mobilize soldiers. It mobilized inventors. Universities were converted into research hubs. Civilian scientists became weapons designers overnight. Entire industries pivoted toward survival. This wasn't just a military war, it was a technological arms race with extinction on the line. Germany was building rockets. Japan was perfecting naval aviation. Britain was racing to decode enemy transmissions. And America? America was creating technologies the world didn't even know were possible yet. But here's the twist: most of the machines that truly won the war were never meant to be seen. B-roll, blueprints scrolling across screen, engineers sketching late into the night. The Japanese feared American manufacturing power. The Germans feared American air fleets. But what they never fully realized was that the most dangerous American weapons were invisible. Take radar. Before World War II, detecting aircraft beyond human sight was fantasy. During the war, it became the shield that protected entire cities. American radar stations turned darkness into daylight. Enemy bombers were tracked long before they reached their targets. Naval fleets could see across thousands of miles of ocean. Entire surprise attacks simply stopped working. And yet, when people talk about World War II, radar is barely mentioned. Or take proximity fuses, tiny devices placed inside artillery shells that caused explosions to trigger in midair near aircraft and troops instead of on impact. Before this invention, thousands of shells missed fast-moving targets. After it, enemy aircraft fell from the sky in flames. German generals called it black magic. Japanese pilots believed they were being hunted by supernatural weapons. But it was American engineering, compact, silent, devastating. And then there was battlefield medicine. More American soldiers survived their wounds in World War II than in any war before it, not because bullets were weaker, but because medicine had evolved faster than warfare itself. Blood plasma, mass-produced penicillin, mobile surgical units. These weren't just medical improvements. They were life factories on wheels. A Marine shot on Iwo Jima could be operating again months later. In previous wars, he would have died in hours. B-roll, field hospital footage, surgeons working under tent lights, medics carrying wounded soldiers. Even logistics became a weapon. America didn't just move troops. It moved entire cities of steel across oceans. Fuel, food, ammo, vehicles, aircraft, boats, medical supplies. Entire armies were fed, fueled, and repaired across thousands of miles of enemy-controlled seas. And the technology that made this possible, modular shipbuilding, Automated factories, standardized parts, would later become the backbone of global supply chains. Yet almost no one calls this a weapon. But perhaps most unbelievable of all was the birth of the computer. Not the consumer device you know today, but massive rooms filled with glowing tubes and whirring machines designed for one purpose: calculation at warp speed. These early American computers tracked missile trajectories, cryptographic systems, and artillery accuracy faster than any human team ever could. Warfare was no longer limited by human reflexes. It had entered the age of machine intelligence. B-roll, ENIAC computer room, vacuum tubes glowing, operators feeding punch cards. And still, none of these machines became household names. They were buried under classified labels, locked behind secrecy laws, dismantled after the war, or absorbed quietly into civilian life. And that is exactly why they are underappreciated. Hollywood shows you explosions. History books show you battle maps. But the truth is far more haunting. World War II was won as much in laboratories as it was on beaches. This series is not about soldiers alone. It is about the machines that whispered victory into their hands. About the forgotten engineers. The silent breakthroughs. The technologies the enemy never fully understood until it was too late. Because by the time German radar was being jammed, by the time Japanese artillery was being outsmarted, by the time Allied medics were reversing death on the front lines, the war was already being decided quietly, efficiently, and scientifically. B-roll, slow fade between soldiers advancing and scientists working in labs. In the next chapters, we will break down the invisible machines that made air dominance possible, the medical tech that turned fatal wounds into survivable injuries, the secret communication systems that made enemy armies blind, and the forgotten inventions that shaped the world after 1945. These were not just tools of war. They were the foundation of the modern world. And almost no one talks about them. Pause. This is the true story of the underappreciated American technology of World War II. And we're only just beginning. Before the silent machines of victory could change the world itself stood dangerously unprepared. In the late 1930s, global warfare was still rooted in ideas born from World War I: mass infantry charges, heavy artillery barrages, slow-moving armor, and communication methods that relied on runners, radio guesses, and delayed decisions. Strategy was built on what could be seen, heard, and physically touched. What nations did not yet understand was that war was about to become invisible. B-roll, black and white footage of World War I trenches, soldiers charging across open fields. By 1939, when Germany invaded Poland and ignited World War II, the world's major powers raced not only for territorial expansion, but also for technological dominance. Germany had blitzkrieg tactics powered by tanks and aircraft working in terrifying coordination. Japan held naval superiority across the Pacific with aircraft carriers and long-range fighters. Britain controlled the seas, but stood exposed in the skies. And America? America was watching from the sidelines, industrially powerful, militarily inexperienced, and technologically underestimated. In 1939, the U.S. Army ranked 18th in the world in size, behind nations like Romania and Portugal. Its Air Force had fewer than 2,000 modern aircraft. Its radar capabilities were experimental. Its medicine lagged behind European research. Its computing machines barely existed outside of universities. On paper, the United States was not ready for global war. But beneath the surface, something else was awakening. B-roll, Ford factory floors converting from cars to military vehicles. As war spread across Europe and Asia, American military planners understood something terrifying. If the United States entered this conflict using only traditional weapons, it would drown in blood, just like every war before it. So instead of focusing only on soldiers and bullets, America chose a different battlefield: research and innovation. In 1940, even before Pearl Harbor, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized massive scientific mobilization. Civilian laboratories were absorbed into military projects. Universities shifted from education to weapons research. The National Defense Research Committee was formed to bridge science and warfare. For the first time in history, a nation was preparing to fight a technological war at industrial scale. B-roll, scientists in lab coats, chalkboards covered in equations. Then came December 7, 1941. The skies above Pearl Harbor burned. Battleships sank. Over 2,400 Americans died in a single morning. Overnight, isolation vanished. The United States was now at war with Japan, and weeks later with Germany and Italy. But something even more significant happened beneath the shock and smoke. The American government unleashed unrestricted scientific warfare. Billions of dollars poured into classified research. Engineers were given near-limitless resources. Projects that once took decades were now demanded in months. Entire cities were built around laboratories. Secrecy became law. Even members of the same research team didn't always know what the person beside them was building. B-roll, Manhattan Project site, massive construction behind fences. At the same time, the enemy was advancing fast. Germany was developing long-range rockets capable of striking cities across national borders. Japan was building elite naval air power that dominated the Pacific. Britain fought for survival under relentless bombing. The technological clock was ticking. And America was racing not just to catch up, but to leap ahead. The early years of the war exposed brutal weaknesses in traditional combat. Aircraft flew too fast for standard anti-aircraft guns. Submarines became undetectable killers beneath the sea. Artillery lacked accurate targeting. Infantry died from infection as often as from bullets. Battles were being lost not only because of enemy strength, but because existing technology simply could not keep up. This forced a radical shift in thinking. Instead of looking at weapons alone, American planners began to dissect war into systems. Detection, communication, movement, survival, production, calculation. And within each system, they looked for breaking points, human limits that machines could exceed. B-roll, radar dish turning slowly, operators tracking aircraft blips. Radar emerged as one of the first battlegrounds of invisibility. Britain had already deployed early warning radar against German bombers, but American engineers took the concept further, miniaturizing it, hardening it for naval warfare, and deploying it across massive fleets. What once took an entire station to operate would soon fit inside aircraft. The ocean was no longer blind. The sky no longer belonged to surprise. Meanwhile, American physicists wrestled with a different problem: how to make artillery smarter. Traditional shells depended on impact to explode. Against fast planes or moving infantry, most shots wasted lethal potential. This gave birth to one of the most secretive projects of the war, the proximity fuse. Tiny radar-controlled detonators inside shells that exploded when they sensed nearby targets. This single invention multiplied the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire overnight. Entire enemy squadrons vanished without ever reaching their targets. B-roll, anti-aircraft fire lighting up the sky. Then came medicine. Before World War II, battlefield survival rates were horrifying. A soldier struck in the chest had minutes to live. Infections killed more men than bullets. Medical evacuation took hours, sometimes days. America changed that equation with mobile surgical units, blood plasma distribution, antibiotics, and standardized trauma care. For the first time in human history, armies could reverse death at scale. But perhaps the most extraordinary shift took place inside factories. The U.S. industrial system was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Car factories converted into tank plants. Typewriter companies built machine guns. Refrigerator manufacturers produced aircraft parts. This wasn't just manufacturing, it was modular mass production, the ability to build millions of identical components with perfect precision and replace any broken part anywhere in the world. This solved one of warfare's oldest problems: sustainability. Armies no longer ran out of parts. Damaged equipment could be repaired instantly. Entire fleets could be rebuilt faster than enemies could destroy them. While Germany's advanced weapons were handmade and slow to replace, America's weapons rolled off conveyor belts in endless waves. But the real revolution was happening quietly inside rooms filled with wires, glowing tubes, and punch cards. Before World War II, calculations for ballistics, navigation, and cryptography were done by hand. Thousands of mathematicians working around the clock. It took days to compute what now took seconds. American engineers eliminated that bottleneck by creating electronic computation, machines that could calculate faster than any human brain. The age of algorithmic warfare was born. By 1944, the world no longer fought the same war it had started in 1939. Aircraft no longer flew blind. Ships no longer sailed unseen. Wounded soldiers no longer died in dirt. Factories no longer slept. And enemies no longer understood how they had lost entire battles in a single afternoon. America had transformed war itself, not through one single superweapon, but through hundreds of invisible breakthroughs working in total synchronization. The machines were ready. Across oceans, deserts, skies, and frozen mountains, America's hidden technologies finally met real war. And what followed stunned even the men who built them. The first silent revolution struck in the air. In 1943, American bombers began flying deeper into enemy territory than ever before. Before this, bomber crews were flying blind. Clouds, darkness, flak, and enemy fighters turned every mission into a gamble with death. Navigation errors sent entire squadrons into mountains. German radar tracked them with brutal precision. Losses were catastrophic. Then, the balance shattered. Inside the noses of American bombers, new devices awakened, radar navigation systems that turned darkness into vision. Enemy cities appeared as glowing outlines on ghostly green screens. Clouds became meaningless. Night became irrelevant. Bombardiers no longer guessed. They saw B-roll, B-17 bombers flying through clouds, cockpit radar screens glowing. Entire production centers vanished from the map in single night raids. German factories that once operated safely after sunset were reduced to firestorms before dawn. The enemy no longer understood how American bombers kept finding them through darkness, storms, and deception. And then came the sky itself. Over the Pacific, Japanese pilots had once ruled the air. They were faster, lighter, deadlier. Early in the war, American pilots died in terrifying numbers. Their planes were fragile. Their tactics outdated. Then the machines changed. New fire control computers entered American fighters, tiny mechanical brains that predicted enemy movement in fractions of a second. Pilots no longer fired where the enemy was, but where the enemy would be. This was no longer human reflex. This was machine-guided death. Japanese aces who once dominated the skies began falling from the clouds without understanding how they had been outflown. American pilots described it simply. It felt like the enemy slowed down, but we had sped up. B-roll, dogfights over the Pacific, tracers cutting through clouds. Meanwhile, the deadliest battlefield on Earth was not the sky, it was beneath the sea. German U-boats had turned the Atlantic into a graveyard. Cargo ships vanished without warning. Civilians drowned by the tens of thousands. Britain was on the brink of starvation. American supply lines were being butchered in silence. The ocean belonged to the submarine. Until it didn't. American sonar systems began hunting underwater shadows with acoustic precision. Depth charges were no longer dropped blindly. They were hunted, coordinated, calculated. And then came the proximity fuse. The first time it was used in naval combat, sailors couldn't believe the results. Anti-aircraft guns that once wasted thousands of shells now detonated automatically when enemy aircraft merely passed nearby. Japanese dive bombers attacking American fleets were obliterated in midair. Pilots never reached their targets. They never even understood what hit them. The skies above American ships became death zones. Invisible, unavoidable, unforgiving. B-roll, Japanese aircraft exploding near U.S. battleships. But the machines were not finished. In the jungles of the Pacific, American Marines faced Japan's most feared weapon, not machines, but determination. Banzai charges, tunnel warfare, suicide attacks. Entire islands turned into labyrinths of hidden death. Casualties exploded. Then the medical revolution struck the front lines. Mobile surgical hospitals followed directly behind advancing troops. Wounded soldiers who would have died within minutes now received plasma, antibiotics, and trauma surgery inside the combat zone. A Marine shot through the chest in 1942 is dead. The same Marine in 1944 had a fighting chance. This changed everything. Soldiers advanced knowing they might survive. Morale surged. Fear lost power. America wasn't just fighting better. It was refusing to let its men die. B-roll. Battlefield medics carrying wounded, emergency surgeries under tents. Then came the factory's revenge. In 1942, Germany still believed American production was exaggerated propaganda. In 1943, that belief collapsed. The United States produced 300,000 aircraft, 86,000 tanks, 2.5 million trucks, 41 billion rounds of ammunition. The enemy didn't face an army anymore. They faced a machine that manufactured armies. When a tank was destroyed, 3 more arrived. When a plane fell, 5 replaced it. When a ship sank, another was already launching. Germany's engineers built brilliance. America built inevitability. B-roll. Endless tank columns rolling across roads. But perhaps the most terrifying battlefield transformation happened inside tiny rooms filled with wires and spinning wheels, cryptography. Before World War II, military codes were considered unbreakable. Germany's Enigma machine was thought mathematically unbeatable. Japanese naval codes had never been cracked. They were wrong. American-based computing machines, working alongside human cryptanalysts, began tearing through enemy secrets at inhuman speed. Entire battle plans were being read before they happened. Admirals made lucky guesses. Generals launched perfect ambushes. Convoys avoided submarines by minutes. The enemy called it coincidence. It was calculation. Entire battles were being won before the first shot was fired. B-roll. Codebreakers feeding punch cards into early computers. And now, the Pacific exploded. At Midway. At Guadalcanal. At Leyte Gulf. Japanese forces attacked with absolute confidence and ran headfirst into ambushes they never sensed. Their carriers were waiting targets. Their pilots flying into traps. Their fleet movements predicted days in advance. Even Japan's most elite admirals began to whisper the unthinkable. The Americans can see the future. They could not comprehend that the future was being computed. But the most devastating deployment of underappreciated technology came not from bombs. It came from logistics. Fuel, food, medical supplies, aircraft parts, artillery shells. While enemy forces bled dry for lack of resources, American supply chains moved like clockwork across oceans. Automated scheduling, precision shipping, modular repair systems. Entire battlefronts remained operational without interruption. War, for the first time, became sustainable. The enemy could inflict damage. They could not exhaust the system. And as the war dragged into 1944, then 1945, something terrifying became clear. The battlefield no longer decided victory. The machines did. A tank crew did not defeat a tank crew. A system defeated a system. And America's systems were untouchable. B-roll. Massive invasion fleet assembling for D-Day. Then came the moment the world would never forget. June 6, 1944. D-Day. The largest amphibious invasion in human history. Thousands of ships. Thousands of aircraft. Hundreds of thousands of men. Every movement synchronized by machines. Every bombardment guided by computation. Every supply drop calculated to the minute. The invasion should have failed. It didn't. Because behind every soldier stood an invisible empire of code, steel, medicine, production, and calculation. By nightfall, Nazi Germany's fate was sealed. And the world entered a new age. Not of soldiers, but of systems. Slow pause. The enemy now understood the truth too late. This war was no longer about bravery alone. It was about what humans had built. And what those machines could now decide. By 1944, American forces had developed a staggering technological edge over the Axis powers. Radar systems, proximity fuses, amphibious vehicles, mechanized artillery, and code-breaking machines gave the U.S. an advantage in both Europe and the Pacific. On paper, the combination of innovation, industrial might, and manpower seemed unstoppable. Yet, the reality of war quickly exposed a sobering truth. No matter how advanced the machines, they could fail, and human skill, courage, and adaptability remain the ultimate decisive factors. B-roll, aerial footage of warships, radar stations, soldiers preparing equipment. The Pacific Theater, in particular, revealed the limitations of even the most sophisticated technology. On islands like Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Guadalcanal, Japanese defenders had perfected the art of concealment. Hidden tunnels, fortified bunkers, camouflaged artillery, and well-placed snipers often rendered radar and reconnaissance almost useless. Marines waiting onto beaches found themselves facing enemies who seemed invisible until the first deadly shots rang out. Technology could provide information, but it could not predict every hidden threat. Soldiers had to rely on intuition, adaptability, and raw courage to survive. B-roll, Marines advancing on beaches, dense jungle terrain, hidden bunkers, storms, and unpredictable environmental factors compounded the challenge. During operations near the Mariana Islands, a sudden tropical storm struck, tossing waves onto landing craft, reducing visibility, and briefly disabling radar systems on the fleet. Pilots struggled to land safely on aircraft carriers, while officers coordinated troop movements amid chaos. Machines that were supposed to guarantee precision faltered under the force of nature, leaving human judgment to fill the gap. B-roll, ships battling rough seas, aircraft landing on carriers, Marines clinging to wet terrain. The European theater presented its own dramatic twists. During D-Day, Allied forces depended on meticulous coordination of thousands of ships, aircraft, and ground troops. The entire plan relied on precise timing and advanced technology, yet tides, fog, and enemy countermeasures introduced chaos. Landing crafts veered off course, soldiers were pinned down by unexpected fire, and medics struggled to reach the wounded. Once again, technology could only assist. Human improvisation determined the outcome. B-roll, landing crafts approaching Normandy, soldiers in combat, field medics treating casualties. Even intelligence, America's celebrated advantage, could not eliminate uncertainty. Codebreakers at Bletchley Park and Pacific Intelligence units intercepted Japanese communications, providing critical insight into enemy movements. Yet cryptographers occasionally failed, and Japanese forces adapted their communication strategies, rendering some intercepts inaccurate. Machines provided data, but interpretation and rapid decision-making remained in the hands of humans. Officers and analysts had to think creatively to anticipate moves that technology alone could not predict. Despite these challenges, some of the most underappreciated technologies emerged as life-saving. Portable radios allowed frontline units to communicate in real time, coordinating attacks that previously would have been impossible. Night vision scopes and flares transformed night operations, giving Marines a tactical edge during darkness. Amphibious landing vehicles converted deadly coastlines into navigable battlegrounds, giving soldiers mobility where foot soldiers might otherwise perish. In each case, the technology's true power was realized only when combined with human ingenuity and bravery. B-roll, Marines using radios, night operations, amphibious vehicles in action. Psychologically, these near failures had a profound effect on both troops and commanders. Soldiers learned to respect their equipment, but also to expect the unexpected. Reliance on machines alone could be fatal. Commanders discovered that instinct, experience, and adaptability were just as crucial as technological superiority. A misjudged wave, an unanticipated enemy maneuver, or a mechanical failure could alter the entire course of a battle. The unpredictability of war meant that humans remained the most vital component in every engagement. B-roll, officers consulting maps, soldiers navigating obstacles, engineers repairing equipment. In the Pacific, Marines discovered firsthand how technology could fail in the most critical moments. Radar might miss hidden bunkers, artillery might overshoot due to miscalculated wind, amphibious vehicles could be immobilized on reefs. Each failure tested soldiers' creativity and courage. Field engineers improvised repairs under fire, medics adapted procedures to treat casualties, and officers restructured plans in real time. Victory was achieved not through machines alone, but through human problem-solving in moments of life-and-death urgency. B-roll: Marines improvising, engineers fixing vehicles under fire, soldiers advancing through jungle. The psychological burden of these near misses was immense. Troops understood that even the most advanced inventions were not guarantees of survival. Overconfidence in technology could be as dangerous as enemy fire. It became clear that the most decisive factor in every mission was the adaptability, training, and resilience of the men and women operating the machines. In effect, every technological advantage magnified human skill, but could not replace it. B-roll: soldiers reflecting, officers giving orders, Marines preparing for the next engagement. Even highly secretive programs, like the Manhattan Project, highlighted the precarious balance between innovation and danger. Scientists worked with volatile materials where one miscalculation could have caused catastrophic results. Months of careful experimentation hung on razor-thin margins. The brilliance of the machines could have been rendered meaningless by human error or by unforeseen circumstances. The lesson became painfully clear: technology was an amplifier of capability, but not a replacement for judgment, ingenuity, or courage. By late 1944, a pattern emerged across theaters. Operations succeeded not because machines were flawless, but because humans compensated when systems faltered. Every radar blip, supply shipment, or landing craft that overcame obstacles owed its success to the human operator. The combination of technological innovation and human improvisation was the secret behind American victories. America's technological advantages were profound but imperfect. Storms, hidden enemy positions, intelligence gaps, and mechanical failures consistently tested the limits of innovation. Yet at every moment of crisis, human skill bridged the gap between potential disaster and victory. Soldiers, sailors, engineers, and officers adapted, improvised, and persevered, demonstrating that technology alone could not secure triumph. Human ingenuity remained the ultimate weapon. By understanding these near failures, one can appreciate the delicate balance between invention and execution. Machines magnified American power, but it was human adaptability that transformed capability into decisive outcomes. The lessons learned in these battles would shape military doctrine, strategy, and innovation for decades to come, proving that even the most brilliant technologies are only as effective as the humans who operate them. The narrative is clear: war is unpredictable, machines are imperfect, and human skill is irreplaceable. Every victory, every breakthrough, every underappreciated piece of technology owed its effectiveness to the resilience, courage, and ingenuity of the people behind it. The war was over, but the echoes of its machines, men, and battles would resonate for generations. Across continents, seas, and skies, the United States had proven that innovation, courage, and adaptability could overcome even the most formidable enemies. But victory came with a price, a hidden cost that few fully understood at the time. B-roll: smoke rising from liberated cities, soldiers saluting. American technology had rewritten the rules of war. Radar-guided bombers had leveled cities once considered untouchable. Proximity fuses had shredded the skies, transforming anti-aircraft defenses into near-automatic killers. Advanced logistics ensured that troops always had what they needed: guns, food, medical supplies, often before they even realized the need existed. Even cryptography had become a silent assassin, allowing the Allies to anticipate enemy movements with surgical precision. B-roll: radar operators at work, supply ships unloading, bombers over cityscapes. But for every triumph, there had been a near catastrophe. Typhoons in the Pacific, misrouted supply convoys in Europe, cryptography errors, and overconfidence in technological supremacy had almost spelled disaster more than once. The war had demanded not just machines, but human resilience, decision-making, and instinct. Soldiers and engineers learned to improvise, adapt, and survive when the systems they trusted faltered. This synergy between human ingenuity and machine power had become the defining characteristic of modern combat. B-roll: soldiers repairing equipment, medics assisting the wounded, engineers at work. The men who had relied on these innovations understood the stakes. A Marine advancing across a coral reef under heavy fire knew that radar might guide aircraft, but survival depended on his own courage. A Navy officer maneuvering a carrier through stormy seas understood that sonar could detect submarines, yet only intuition and experience could prevent disaster. Even the most advanced bomber computers could not save lives if pilots hesitated or froze. Technology amplified power, but humans determined its true impact. B-roll: Marines advancing under fire, pilots in cockpit, officers shouting orders. On the battlefield, lessons were learned the hard way. Japanese defenders, though initially outmatched, adapted with tunnels, hidden artillery, and deceptive strategies. They forced American forces to constantly innovate, demonstrating that no machine, however advanced, could guarantee success against a clever adversary. Every tactical success was a combination of machinery, strategy, and human adaptability. B-roll: Japanese tunnels, hidden guns, American forces discovering traps. By 1945, the war had entered its final stages. Atomic weapons were dropped, signaling an unprecedented escalation in technological warfare. But even as the mushroom clouds rose, the stories of courage, ingenuity, and human sacrifice remained at the heart of victory. Soldiers who survived battles in the Pacific and Europe carried memories of a war where machines were allies, not replacements. B-roll: atomic mushroom cloud in the distance, soldiers looking on, devastated landscapes. The true legacy of World War II lay not just in the machines, but in the relationship between man and invention. The United States had demonstrated the power of innovation, but also the necessity of humility. Technology could give advantage, but it could also fail. Victory depended not on the perfection of systems, but on the relentless adaptability of those who operated them. B-roll: engineers working on post-war technology, veterans walking through ruins, and yet, the story did not end in 1945. The lessons learned from underappreciated American tech, from radar to proximity fuses to logistical marvels, became the foundation of modern warfare. Jet engines, guided missiles, and computer networks were all born from the crucible of World War II. The conflict had proven that innovation could determine the course of history, but only when combined with courage, sacrifice, and adaptability. B-roll: post-war military technology, engineers in labs, veterans in discussion. As history turned its pages, the question lingered: what if one of those near catastrophes had not been averted? What if storms had sunk the Mariana Fleet? What if cryptography errors had led to a devastating ambush? The world survived, but by the slimmest of margins. Victory, though inevitable in hindsight, had never been guaranteed. B-roll: stormy seas, cryptographers working frantically, soldiers reacting in shock. In the Pacific, American Marines stood on captured islands, exhausted but triumphant. They understood, more than anyone, the delicate balance between human ingenuity and machine power. Every battle scarred the landscape and their minds, but each one told a story of determination, improvisation, and technological prowess. B-roll: Marines raising flags, memorials, destroyed bunkers. And the world outside those islands watched in awe. Nations that had underestimated the United States now recognized a simple truth: innovation, when coupled with relentless human effort, was unstoppable. But the same nations also realized that this new era of war demanded respect for the fragility and unpredictability inherent in even the most advanced systems. B-roll: newsreels of celebrations, international reactions, political maps, the final twist: the lingering cliffhanger, came not from technology, but from humanity itself. The men and women who had harnessed these machines returned to a peacetime world forever changed. They had seen the power of invention, the price of hubris, and the necessity of adaptability. The question remained, how would the lessons of this war shape the next? How would humanity ensure that the machines they created to save lives would never be allowed to destroy them? B-roll. Soldiers returning home, engineers walking into factories, close-ups of determined faces. As the sun set over the battlefields of Europe and the Pacific, the machines lay silent, but their legacy roared louder than any artillery. The invisible algorithms, mechanical minds, and logistical systems had rewritten the rules of combat. Yet it was the human spirit, the courage, the sacrifice, the creativity that had given life to technology and ensured victory. And somewhere in the shadows of history, the next generation watched, learning the ultimate lesson: war is won not by machines alone, but by those who master them under fire. B-roll. Sunset over battlefields, flags waving, veterans saluting. The world had changed. The war machines slept, but the questions remained. Could humanity wield technology without being consumed by it? Could lessons learned in fire and blood prevent future catastrophes? History offered no guarantees. Only preparation, vigilance, and courage could end with that. The curtain closed on one of the most technologically transformative wars in history, but the story was far from over. The innovations, triumphs, near disasters, and lessons learned would echo across decades, influencing every soldier, inventor, and strategist who followed. And in the shadows of victory, the questions still lingered: were we ready for the wars yet to come?